Ping pong! This is the second one now. This one has to do with paddles and working with paddles. The paddles are basically going to be lines, and we're going to draw the paddles near the edges at the center of each side. So over on the left side we'll have a left paddle, and it'll be drawn close to the left side but centered in the screen. And on the right side we're going to have a right paddle, and again it'll be drawn close to that side. In this little video I'll primarily do the right paddle, and then you can do the same for the left paddle, just kind of reverse things. Let's take a look at it. First of all, when we're keeping track of the paddles, we're going to use a line for the paddle, and if you take a look at the line, you know there's two endpoints. There's one down here and then there's one up here, and keeping track of both endpoints would be more than we need to do really. All we really need is the top endpoint or the bottom. I prefer to use the top one. And we need a paddle size, and by using that paddle size down here we can get the second endpoint. The x coordinates of each paddle is going to stay the same because the paddle is going to be vertical. If you really wanted to make a difficult game, you could angle it, and then that would add another level of difficulty. But that also would add a great deal of difficulty programming the ball bounce, because then you'd have to meet the ball bounce with the angle and the normalcy, and that would be taking a little bit of trigonometry. So we're going to keep this simple. Paddle stays up and down. Paddle stays at one level at where we put it, x-wise, but it moves up and down in the y direction. And for that, all you need is one extra variable besides the coordinates of the top, and that is the paddle size down here. Okay, so the bottom point can be found by simply adding the paddle size to the y. Alright, well with that in mind, let's go and look at some code now and see how I went about adding these paddles in. Basically, looking at what we've got here as far as new variables, I've actually added the variables. We only need for this demonstration to add these two and this one, because I'm going to work with just the right paddle. Alright, these other two and this one would be the one you add for the left paddle, of course, and that's all the more you need to add here in reality. If you wanted your paddles two different colors, you'd need to add another color variable. I'm going to use the same color for both paddles, and it's going to be the same color as the ball, so you have to maybe add color variables if you wanted those. Alright, coming down to where we actually create the paddle, that would be in the form load down here. So let's bring down to the form load and look at what we've done to that. Well, not a whole lot. I've increased the line width to 5 because I want my paddles to be a little thicker. So remember, I had line width set at 1 originally. You'll need to change that to 5. Alright, so my line width is 5. I've set my paddle size at 100 pixels, and this is the only one I'm working with. The other one you'll put in for your left paddle. I've then set my paddles on the screen. Now I'm going to show you how to set both paddles because it's a little different for each side. The first side, my x coordinate of my paddle over on the right side is going to be basically all the way over to the end of the screen, the pick table dot width, minus the amount I want it to come in, which is 30 pixels in from the side. And then I simply set the y coordinate. Now if I just use this part, pick table height divided by 2, that would get me halfway down the screen, but it would put the top of the paddle halfway down the screen. I want the middle of the paddle halfway down the screen, so I take the paddle size and divide by 2 and subtract it from that, and that kind of moves the top point up a little bit and puts the middle point of the paddle in the middle of the screen. So that's how we set the paddle in the middle of the screen. Now on the left side it's a little easier because you just move in 30 pixels. You don't have to actually, pixels rather, you don't have to actually subtract any width or anything, or subtract the 30 from width. You just move it in as far as you want to move it in. And again, the same idea. I come down halfway on the screen, that would put the top of the paddle halfway down. By subtracting half of the paddle size, that puts the middle of the paddle in the center of the screen. So that's how we set up the paddles right there. That's both paddles set up for you, so you see how that works. Let's now take a look and see what we do to draw the paddles, and for that it's just right down here. since we're drawing a line, we now need to use the pen. Remember, we used the brush to draw a solid circle. Brushes are used to draw solid circles. So I set the pen up with a color and a line width, and now I can use that pen here and here in drawing my two paddles. The first paddle, a line goes from one point to the other point. So the first paddle, it starts, here's the top point of the line, x and y coordinate. This is the left paddle I'm doing right here. And then here's the bottom point, which is the same x coordinate, but notice, to get the y coordinate, I've simply added the paddle size to it. Same with the right paddle. Again, I have two separate sets of coordinates for these. Okay, there's the bottom right here. That's the x coordinate. This part over here is the top, and then this is the other end of the line, which I have to add paddle size to. Now I've got a left size and a right size, and the reason I did this is in some games, you know, as time goes on and depending on how many points, you can make it more difficult by simply changing the paddle size, making your paddle smaller and smaller and smaller as the game goes on. It makes it more difficult. We're not going to do that in this one, by the way, but if you wanted to add that on for the fun of it, that could be an interesting twist. But the requirement won't require that. Alright, so we've got the paddles added in. Let's go look and see what's next now. That's two paddles sitting there. Now we want to get movement going. So we don't go down to the timer. That's where the ball is. See? Right down in here. This is the timer section, and this is the ball. Notice there's nothing new added there. Instead, we want our keys to move our paddles. So again, like we did in the space one, we have a key down routine. Okay? Some project key down. So here's our project key down routine. Now the key down routine allows us to capture the keys, get the key code just like we did before in the space one. For the right paddle, and this is just the right paddle, I'm going to use the number pad 8 and the number pad 2 keys. Every time I hit the 8, 8 will be up. Every time I hit the 8, I want to subtract 5, because remember, the way the screen is set up in the Y direction, up is really less, down is really more. You add to the Y to go down, you subtract from the Y to go up. So I take that, I take whatever the paddle unit is at the time, whatever the Y coordinate is at the time, and subtract 5 from it, and that causes it to go up. Now, upon doing this, immediately upon doing this, I have to look and check to see if my paddle has gone up off the screen, because I don't want that. So to check, I just check to see if my top point is less than 0. And if it is, I don't want it wrapping around. I want it staying right there. So I reset it to 0. And that causes the paddle to go up to the top and stay at the top. If you just keep pushing up, it just stays at the top. Because anytime it gets less than 0, it comes back to 0. Alright? The right paddle, a little different. Alright? The right paddle, remember, we have to worry about paddle size. So again, to make the right paddle move, this statement right here. Right paddle equals the right paddle Y coordinate plus 5. Plus 5 is down. Now immediately I have to see if the bottom of the paddle has gone off the screen. Well, here it is. I'm going to check the Y coordinate. Now this is the top of the paddle. So it will be on the screen. The top of the paddle, since that's the only point we're keeping track of, will stay on the screen if I just put less than pick table height. But then the rest of the paddle would have disappeared off the screen by then, and I don't want that. So really what I look at is I look to see that the top of the paddle doesn't go past the height minus the size of the paddle, which means I put the boundary up a little higher so the top of the paddle can't go off and past that boundary point, which is up a little higher on the screen. That allows the whole paddle to remain on the screen. If it does go down off the screen, then I set the paddle coordinate to that very point to make sure it doesn't go off the screen. That's pretty much it for paddles. Now, this does not allow the paddle to reflect the ball, and you'll see when I bring the code online here that in fact the ball will go right through the paddle. The paddle is transparent to the ball at this point, and that's in our next little video showing you how that goes. So let me hit the run button here just to see, and I'll have to go off the screen to grab the program. And here it is. Now just watch this thing go. There's the ball going around, and I can move this paddle up and down. Missing a little bit here. And watch this. Right through the paddle over there. Okay, now let's see if I can catch this one. Ah, missed. See, right through the back of the paddle. It goes in and out through the paddle. The paddle is transparent yet, and that's in the next movement. Look, I go down, can't move. I go up, right through the paddle, can't move any higher. I'm still hitting the keys, coming down. Hitting the keys is not going down. So that's what we want our paddle to do, stay on the screen. We would like the ball to bounce off it, and that's going to be shown to you in the next video. For now, get those working and get that much checked off.